infrastructure projects. I think they are of value to the economy long term. But creating a better climate for small businesses to survive and flourish, I think, is the best way to come out of this recession. So we have a number of programs to do just that. First on credit, tax incentives for hiring the unemployed, small business loans so that they can turn to those as well. It has a variety of different approaches to it. It isn't going to be in a huge New Deal type of government spending. The stimulus was a major investment. I think it helped, and without it we'd be in terrible shape. But this has to be a much more targeted approach.
Healthcare took months to debate and pass. Financial regulation is taking a while. How do you do all what you just said in 6 months, plus immigration reform, plus climate change? Are they on the table?
Well, they're all up for consideration, and whether we can move them is another story. You know, we may have 13 weeks left, 13 only, before the election of actual time in Washington. That's a very limited amount of time, and we've not said a word about the budget or the appropriations process, which is a must before it's all finished. What Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi are trying to do is to at least move us to the point where decisions are made. I will say quite candidly that the other side of the aisle views it differently. The more they can slow us down, the longer it can take to do any single thing, the less we will accomplish. And that appears to be their goal.
Well, a lot of us who have followed the Senate for a while see things that used to take 2 days taking a week. Things that used to be done very routinely would get stalled. Unemployment extension is an example. So to a lot of us, it seems like it's broken in a lot of ways. But after the election, even a good result, you'll likely lose a few seats. You could lose a lot of seats, and if you do, you're likely to see many more conservative Republicans of a Jim DeMint type, and then on your side, one of your incumbents, Blanche Lincoln, is being challenged from the left. I mean, so you see a Senate that's becoming more and more polarized when, in order to function, it needs to come together. Can you address what the institution is facing, and is there a way to put Humpty Dumpty back together again?
Well, that's a pretty rosy scenario that you paint, I'll tell you. And I will say that I believe that short of changes in rules and procedure, that we are bound to go through this phase for some period of time, even beyond the election. The Republicans believe that the most successful strategy they can pursue on the floor is to make sure we do little or nothing. A few weeks ago, we spent an entire week in the Senate debating the extension of unemployment benefits for 4 weeks. 1 week to 4 weeks, and you think to yourself, this isn't going to work out well. The following week, we spent an entire week debating the nominations of 5 people who were all approved by the Senate without much controversy. We have 97, as we tape this program, 97 nominees on the calendar who have been passed out of committee virtually unanimously with no dispute, no controversy, sitting on the calendar because the Republicans see them as bargaining chips with the Senate Democrats and the administration. Okay, we'll give you an assistant secretary in commerce to deal with oceans because, there was that spill in the Gulf. Let's get that one out of the way. That's embarrassing. But let's hold 96 other ones, and see what we can get for them. Same thing's true when it comes to bills on the floor. So far, we've had 96 filibusters in this Congress. I might say to the viewers, that is not common. It's uncommon. It's becoming a recurring trend. Your question's a good one. What happens if the Senate and the House move toward more Republican membership? Well, it means more delay, even less to be done. And that's troubling because I think there are things that definitely need to be done. It will become a compelling issue in the next presidential election.
Do you envision some rules changes? Some of your members are pushing for that.
Well, I can tell you, we thought we had accomplished that in the beginning of the year with a bipartisan rules change, for example, to eliminate secret holds. This is an old anachronism from the old days of the Senate when senators used to be very quietly, put their thumb on a nominee and say, he ain't moving. Right. And I don't have to tell you that it's my thumb. Well, we're trying to change that. We passed this big reform bill on earmarks and travel and gifts and secret holds. And it turns out that even though many of those changes have been implemented, when it comes to secret holds, the other side has said we're not going to abide by Senate Bill 1. So changing the rules takes at least 60 votes, sometimes 67, depending on the rule. But we hope public sentiment will move some of our colleagues on the Republican side to join us with some of these changes.
You say that this notion of bipartisanship and how to fix Humpty Dumpty will be likely to be an issue in the next presidential election, this whole notion of leadership. Your old friend President Obama, is there anything he could be doing now, or is there anything that Democrats could be doing differently to see more of the kind of collaboration we're seeing with financial regulatory reform and maybe less of the, I mean, I suppose you could wait for Republicans to change their strategy, but is there a way to take the initiative here and try to, you know, bring people together on at least some of these simpler issues, some of these nominations?
We've tried. We need to continue to try. So the American people believe that we're showing good faith in our effort to be bipartisan. Financial regulatory reform, Wall Street reform is a good example. Chris Dodd met for 2 months with his Republican counterpart, Richard Shelby of Alabama, and they couldn't reach an agreement on a bill. He then said, okay, I'll meet with Bob Corker, the Republican from Tennessee, on my committee. He seems to be more open. They spent a month together. They couldn't reach an agreement. Dodd said, all right, let's take the bill to the committee and let's just debate these things out. Let's see if we can reach an agreement by the debate process and the amendment process. The Republicans filed 401 amendments. They refused to call any of them to be considered. 20 minutes after the banking committee got together, they took a final vote, sent the financial regulatory bill to the floor. Now, after a week of the Republicans filibustering the bill, trying to stop it, the filibuster was broken, and we're seeing some cooperation on amendments. I've just described a 4-month process that should have taken a matter of weeks. So they achieved their purpose. They dragged this thing out, slowed it down, and now we're seeing some element of cooperation. But if we're going to do that on every important issue facing us, we're not going to get much done. We have to continue to show good faith and try. And if we fail, if the American people think we've been fair in our efforts, then they may hold the Republicans accountable.
To follow up on Shayla's question, as you indicated, we're talking on this Thursday. There's a piece in Roll Call on Thursday, Obama, McConnell, Perfect Strangers, and it talks about the fact that President Obama and the minority leader in the Senate, Mr. McConnell, have not met outside of public meetings that they've had with other leadership. And I was just wondering if President Obama needs to do more to reach out to Republican leaders, and also as Majority Whip, how often do you meet with your counterpart?
John Connell and I are in conversation every day, almost every day, about what's going on the floor or issues that we face in Judiciary Committee or some other place. I mean, it's frequent in terms of our conversation. A lot of work is done through staff, but we have direct communication. We aren't freezing one another out, that's for sure. And I would say, in defense of the president, he really has spent more time entertaining Republican senators during the health care debate. Most of us on the Democratic side felt like we were being jilted by our president. I mean, I won't name names, but there were some Republican senators who, had a regular invitation to lunch down at the White House. It didn't help. We didn't get any of their votes in the final analysis, but it wasn't for lack of trying. So I think that, the president needs to continue to reach out. We need to continue to reach out. But it's really frustrating. How many times are we going to ask this young lady to go to the prom? And she says no. And eventually say, I'm either going to stay home or find another date. So we got to find a way to do this that's more successful.
We have about 5 more minutes.
Well, here's a question you might not like, and I'm sure you'll duck. But Senator McCaskill had a little joke at your and Chuck Schumer's expense at a recent Washington dinner. Everybody knows that Senator Reid has a very difficult re-election battle. What fewer people know is that you and Chuck Schumer are longtime friends, housemates when you're in Washington, and you're both members of the leadership. There's a lot of buzz among politicos around here that you're sort of already eyeing the leadership, and that there's maybe a little tension. Can you address that?
I'll just tell you this. Harry Reid is the majority leader, and he will be the majority leader after this election. And I've told him, and I've kept my word, that I will not approach any member of the Senate Democratic Caucus to discuss this issue in any way whatsoever. He's the leader, and it doesn't help the caucus or Harry Reid to have all this speculation going on.
Do you think Chuck Schumer said the same thing to him?
I have no idea, but that's my standard, and I'm going to live by it.
Another question?
Tell us a little bit more about the midterm landscape. It's a confusing landscape.
It is.
There are so many different types of candidates, and there doesn't seem to be, I mean, liberals seem to be doing well in some places, moderates in others. What do you think, how do you reconcile the frustration that people have with government right now and the general disregard they hold both parties in? Going back to what we were talking about a little earlier, how do Democrats break through that as candidates and begin reconnecting with people on issues like, for instance, the deficit? You know, how do you talk to people about that, address things that maybe they're looking to the Tea Party because they're not hearing what they want to hear from Democrats? Or